Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, Love Log SA. My name is Zach Mdeni. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe and watch my previous videos. On today's video, I have a very special guest, Advocate Lerato Phasha, who will be discussing the role of women in the legal profession as well as the challenges they come across. So I hope you enjoy and learn from the information she'll be sharing with us.
Hi,
Hello Advocate, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm also fine,
Let
thank
me
you.
just increase my volume there.
Is it fine if I call you Advocate?
I, I suppose if
Okay.
that's
Nah,
most
I will
important.
do so. Okay, just for formality purposes. Yeah.
You can do so, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for taking your time so that you can accommodate me in your busy schedule and have this interview with me. Thank you very much. And happy Women's Month. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole Happy Women's Month tends to be quite contentious these days, but thank you very much. I
All
mean,
right.
I don't know how happy it is being a woman in South Africa these days, especially a
Yeah.
black woman like that, but
Difficult
let's
times, eh?
let's let's appreciate that you recognize
Yeah.
us and this is our time. So I guess it's a good place to start, maybe. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Before I shoot into the questions, I'd like you to give us a brief personal and professional background of yourself.
Geez, I don't know if I know how to do that, but let me see. Okay, let me see what would probably be of interest to your audience.
Yeah.
Um, okay, as you would know, I am Advocate Lerato Phasha. I'm a practicing advocate of the High Court of South Africa. I'm also a member of the Johannesburg Society of Advocates. I am in-house counsel at the Center for Applied Legal Studies at WITS as well.
Okay.
And by default, of course, I'm a member of the GCB. Yeah.
All right.
Well, currently, that's what I'm doing. I've been at the bar, let me see, how many years now? I've been at the bar since 2017. So,
Quite a long
yeah.
time, eh?
Not really, but it does feel like a while, yes.
Yeah. Next year you'll be finishing 5 years, so it is quite a long time.
Yes, well, it's
Yeah.
time at the bar flies for many
Yeah.
reasons. The first being that you often don't have time to reflect. You're always sort
Okay.
of busy with one thing or another thing, and before you know it, time has gone. So
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you. What a large portion of my audience is students. So I would just assume that most of them perhaps do not know what advocates do. Like on a daily basis, what would you say advocates do, like traditionally?
Well, I mean, the simplest way to explain it, although I think law students, some will generally know that there's a distinction. The distinction is regulated both by the LPC, now the Legal Practice Council, the Act
Okay.
specifically, as well as other regulations that have traditionally been imposed by what then used to be the Law Society, the Attorneys Act, the Advocates Act, as well as the bar councils or the societies that regulate advocates. So there is, legally speaking, a distinction that's been put in place in terms of what attorneys can do and what advocates can do. Although now that there is the Legal Practice Act, there is now a third category. So traditionally, we had attorneys who would deal directly with clients. They would take instructions. Some of them have right of appearance in the High Court, so they can appear in the High Court for themselves
Okay.
and litigate their own matters. But if you don't have that right of appearance, it means your right of appearance really is generally limited to the lower courts. So if you had to appear in a High Court, the Supreme Court of Appeal, or the Constitutional Court, you would have to brief counsel counsel being advocates, not only because of what we do, which is distinct to what attorneys do, but because of the regulations themselves, the rules, and so on. So it's not just a speciality distinction. But of course, now because of the LPC, or the LPA rather, there is now what we call trust account advocates as well. So these advocates are more like dual advocates. They do the work of attorneys generally, or traditionally what attorneys used to do, and they also do what advocates traditionally used to do. So they are like a new breed, and well, not necessarily so new, but they are they are a hybrid of what attorneys generally are and what advocates generally are. So the distinction between what we do is we are viewed as litigation specialists, advocates. As an attorney, you would deal directly with your client. And when you feel that a matter is complex, sufficiently complicated, or that the matter now needs to move to a stage of litigation, and you foresee that you would have to launch this litigation in a higher court, generally a court you don't have right of appearance in, or because you don't have that particular set of skill, or it's not your speciality, you would then brief counsel, which is what we do. You would then give an advocate a brief. That advocate, of course, we are called creatures of instruction. So we are sort of limited to do what it is we've been instructed to do. Instructions can change, of course, but our conduct before the LPC and the LPA was regulated by the rules of ethics and the ethic code, and the rules of court, of course. But our behavior, whether good or bad, and if you wanted to say something about how we behave, generally you would have to report us to the bar councils back then. But now you can, of course, for those who are part of bars, like I am part of the Johannesburg Society of Advocates, my conduct is still largely regulated, one, by the LPC, because that's what the law says and it dictates, but also because I'm a voluntary member, as we now understand it to be, of the Johannesburg Society of Advocates.
I was asking, besides litigation, what other career options can advocates venture into? And are there any special skills required for those?
So, like I said, I'm also in-house counsel, but generally an advocate cannot work in a law firm, for example. You are limited to what you can do. And before the LPC, you would have to request permission from your bar if you wanted to do something else, either than just practicing from a group or practicing from home, as some advocates do. But you do have to hold membership with an association. Now you can do it just with the LPC, but traditionally it used to be that you have to be part of a bar, or at least have to be an admitted advocate to be able to practice in SA. While there are advocates who were not traditionally part of any bar, or well-recognized bar for that matter, but we're able to practice simply because they are admitted advocates and they're a member of, they're on the role of advocates, so they could. So traditional business is being an advocate. So you can't work, for example, for a law firm. And if you are on the practicing role, you can't work for, let me just say, Discovery or MTN or a corporate. If you want not litigation, you have to, you retain your title, of course, and many people do that. You're not going to stop being an advocate because you're no longer on the practicing role. Unlike with attorneys, if you're an attorney, you're an attorney because you're practicing. If you're not practicing, you're removed from the role of attorneys. You can remove yourself voluntarily or otherwise. But you're an advocate, you remain an advocate. What happens is you can be removed from the practicing role and do other things. There's so many routes to it that I can't at the top of my head list them or even say there's limitations to it.
What would you say is the necessary set of skills rather one should identify about themselves in order to become a good advocate? And if they don't have those skills, how can they develop them?
Okay, so let me start by saying there's a number of interpersonal skills that I think one must have just to be able to, first, not just be a good advocate, a great one at that, but more than that, to be able to withstand the pressures of the profession. It's not an easy profession to be in. So you will have to be a patient person. First of all, you have to have patience. You must absolutely have passion for the law and the hunger for it. You must constantly be curious, because specifically as an advocate, you will constantly deal with new challenges, new areas of the law. And sometimes you're the one who wants to develop a law. For example, the area of law which I'm in, which is public interest law, constitutional law, and administrative law, there's always new dynamics. For example, the dynamic of COVID-19. During this lockdown, one has had to litigate a lot around that area, and it was a new thing. It was a new pandemic, but often the question was whether the actions of the government, or other state organs, or even the private sector, whether the measures that were being taken were constitutional, whether they were lawful, whether they were reasonable. So you must be able to be flexible, be an independent worker. You must be able to work independently. You will always find yourself in situations where you have to resolve problems, new problems at that, on your own. People will not always be available, even in your own group, or your mentors, or even your seniors. Even if you're working with senior counsel on cases, they will rely heavily on you to resolve issues on your own. So you must be independent. You must be hardworking. If you're lazy, I don't know of any lazy advocates, but there may be. But if you are, I can assure you this is not for you. So you probably shouldn't do it, because you will only frustrate yourself and everybody else. So
Yeah.
you must be an innately and naturally hardworking person. Without, I'm getting quite a bit of feedback, but without being pushed, you must be the sort of person that can initiate action on your own. Like I said, work independently. You must have passion for the law. You must be zealous. It's one of those professions that require thick skin. But likely, even if you don't have it at the beginning, you'll probably have it by the end of it. It's one of those things. It sort of comes with the
Definitely.
package. But of course, there's skills that you would, if you don't come into the profession with them, you can learn them. Like, you must absolutely be a good researcher. You must be able to research.
Okay.
You will have to argue. That's what advocates do. So if you don't have good advocacy skills on your own, the good thing is there's pupillage training, which will come with some advocacy training. So those you can develop. You can develop being good at trial work, because nobody is born a trial lawyer. And there's a difference. Not everybody's going to be a trial lawyer. Not everybody's always going to be great at cross-examining. So
Yes.
even within the litigation space itself, there are those people who are very good at drafting. They can draft you under the table and win any case on paper almost. But if they had to take the case to trial, they don't succeed, because they're not good at cross examination. They're not good at thinking on their feet. That person might not be so good with soliciting very important information out of even their own witnesses. So you will have to realize your own litigation style as you go. But that's not something you would have to worry about at a stage where you are deciding whether or not to be an advocate, because you won't even know until you get to an arena where you've had the ability to practice, where you've either practiced as an attorney and you have now an idea of more or less what you think your forte is. You will only find out at that level, not at a level where you're a law student, whether you're going to be a litigating specialist. And even if you're a litigating specialist, whether you're going to be a trial lawyer, or if you're going to practice in an arena where predominantly you want to do applications, whether you want to be a civil lawyer or a criminal lawyer or a family advocate, or whatever.
Okay.
you want to do law or patents, you will generally find out those things when in practice,
When you're in
not
practice.
before. Yeah, not
All
before.
right.
You might have a natural passion, and you might gravitate towards a specific area of law more than another, but
Okay.
in practice, that doesn't really mean much. You realize that once you get into practice, and when you go through pupillage training, that, well, normally they tell you this, and you might realize it once you start practicing, that your practice chooses you more than the other way around. There are a number of people. I mean, I consider myself one of those privileged few people who've went into practice with an ideology that I would practice a certain area of law, and I've been privileged enough to be able to do that. But it's not
Okay.
very common. I will be honest with you. Not
All right.
many people get to practice in the area they intended to, unless you come into practice having been an attorney for a very long time, and you come with the connections, and you come with an almost established client base, and then in that case you may be able to continue on that trajectory. But most of the time, as a new advocate, you realize that the things you were passionate about are not even the things you're going to be able to litigate about.
Okay.
Remember, we get briefs. So if you keep getting briefs from attorneys about labor law and you think you're a family advocate, you're going to end up specializing in labor law and not even family law, because we're simply not getting enough cases to become a specialist in the area you wanted. So most often, like I said, your practice chooses you. You end up specializing more than anything in the area of law that you get to litigate in more often, not necessarily what you studied. There are many people who come with PhDs in philosophy, in other areas, and master's degrees. Almost, Jesus, I don't know how many advocates have master's degrees. Almost everyone has it these days, but many of those people don't even get to practice in the areas where they have a
A
master's.
master's degree.
So yeah, so it
Yeah.
helps to
Okay.
have, yeah, those added set of skills. It helps to have qualifications beyond an LLB, to
Yeah.
have advanced diplomas and other certificates, to have all this exposure and networking you can have before you come to the bar. And I advise
Okay.
it, because the bar is not an easy place to succeed.
All right. All right. Thanks for that, Advocate. The Chief Justice in 2018, in one of the JSC interviews, noted a concern that some of the bars don't usually don't have enough female representation amongst pupils as well as admitted advocates. He stressed his concerns, particularly with regards to the Cape Bar. Equality as being some of the forming the identity of our new dispensation. Do you think there are still barriers or challenges that are faced by women in entering the advocacy profession?
Not entering per se, but I mean, we live in South Africa after all, and
Yeah.
gender still plays a big role in the professional sector, whether legal or otherwise. But in the legal profession specifically, yeah, of course, there's still barriers. They're even bigger barriers if you're a black woman. They're even worse if you're a young black woman. So you must come into the profession knowing that, and perhaps that one of the things I should have mentioned earlier is it should be committed to transformation if you are one, a person who falls within the unfortunate genders, and,
Yeah.
well, the race that is still struggling with equality to this day. So yes, they are both barriers in getting into the profession. Like I said, um, before you become an advocate, it's advisable that you've practiced before. You can come fresh, well, not necessarily fresh out of varsity anymore. You must have done pupillage now, but you could
Yeah.
come as early as you can. But the nature of practice you're likely to have if you come without any experience, it's not necessarily going to be easy for you to break through the barriers. There are already many barriers at the bar. It helps if you come with experience. It comes with some sort of network. It comes if you have a certain set of skill. And I'm talking about experience here, not skills that I'm not referring to interpersonal skills
Yeah.
or anything like that. I'm talking about skills that would have been harnessed and developed throughout practice or research. A lot of people clerk before they come to the bar. It has seemingly assisted those people. It has given them an added edge when it comes to establishing their brands, establishing themselves in practice. And, when it comes to having an added set of skills when it comes to drafting, when it comes to research. So all of those are very important. But of course, the biggest barrier at the bar today, as it was in 1909 or whenever, or 2018, 2000, 2010, every other year today, and probably will still be the problem next year and 10 years from now, is
Yeah.
briefing patterns.
Okay.
It's not the most difficult thing for a Black female person to be, admitted into a pupillage program, because bars now have quotas that they intend to meet. You'll get into pupillage. You may or may not pass. There've been complaints about that. But whether you will actually become a success and will not leave practice within your first year or your first 3 years is a different story altogether. Because women do enter the profession, especially recently. In my pupillage year, there was certainly a number of Black people and a vast number of Black women, but not probably less than half of those people are still in practice today.
Okay.
And whether they will still be in practice 5 years from now is the question.
Okay.
So it's not the most difficult thing to enter the profession anymore. What is the most difficult thing is succeeding, it's surviving. And you don't want to go into a profession just for the purpose of surviving. You want to thrive. And that's what we're still tackling with at the bar. We're still dealing with huge disparities when it comes to briefing patterns. We're still dealing with issues of transformation. It's still issues of Black females and females in general not being brought into important matters, not being allowed to lead important investigations or commissions or cases, of a certain magnitude. And it's because of that, it's because of the briefing patterns that you don't have as many Black female as seats, even in the Johannesburg Bar, which is the most by far transformed in our country. Even in the Johannesburg Bar, we don't have even a fraction of Black female seniors that we have of Black males and white males as their counterparts. So yeah, maybe you get into pupillage, maybe you get accepted into a group, maybe you stay in a bar, but where does that get you if you can't succeed in that space?
Yeah.
If you don't survive in that space?
All right. Wow, that's a very interesting answer. I didn't think of it that way. Would you say perhaps, do you have equal opportunities with your male counterparts in the profession, or do you constantly have to fight for recognition? For instance, in issues that relate to getting work from clients, because there's this stereotype that, for instance, the advocacy, the legal profession in general has been dominated by male in the past. So perhaps there's still that stereotype that male are better lawyers than women. So do you constantly have to fight for recognition in terms of getting work?
Every day.
Yeah.
My answer is every day. Every day. I don't think it's a struggle that is going to end today. It's gender parity is not a real thing in this country. I don't think it's a real thing in the world in general. Women constantly have to fight for a seat at the table. And even when you do have a seat at the table, you have to fight for people in the table to listen to you, to take you seriously, to not question you based on your gender, and to not overlook you for opportunities, or to, really just dismiss you even when you have something important to say. So yeah, every day women in this profession and many other professions constantly have to fight for recognition, constantly have to get over the stigma of being the first, but at least fight to not be the last. So absolutely, you still have groups at the bar who don't have a female group leader. Some may not even have ever had a female group leader. And then the one they have maybe is the first. That this many years into democracy, this many years into the existence of the profession, this many years in us speaking about transformation, that's still a real fight. It's still a real challenge. We still have symposiums at the bar where we still speak about issues of sexual harassment, about how to protect pupils who come into the profession, young females who come into the profession, so that they are not used, they're not forced into forced prostitution. Believe it or not, there are situations in the bar, and it's quite prevalent and it's unfortunate that they are advocates who find themselves in situations where work is so scarce and they're not being given opportunities on merit so much that they feel that they can put themselves in compromising situations, and senior people put them in compromising situations, which is extremely unfortunate. But they find themselves in those positions simply because of their agenda, simply because of the disparities in briefing patterns. So yes, there are unfortunately people who don't want to brief female practitioners, be it at female attorneys, be it trust account advocates, be it advocates in the traditional sense. There's still people who don't trust female magistrates, female judges. There's still issues of transforming the bench. There's still issues of having parity at the bench in general. So whether it's the High Court, the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, these are still ongoing transformation discussions to date. So there's absolutely no way, I think, anyone in their right mind could answer you and say, we have gender equality in the legal profession. But I don't know where you'd have to be living to think that. But absolutely, it's an ongoing struggle. And I don't really know what it will take. But I do know that there are conscious efforts that are being made by groups, by bars. But it would really help to see the state itself play a role in briefing women more. Because we, even in that space, even with departments, even with the state advocates, even with the state attorneys, we still see really horrific briefing patterns.
Is there transparency in the distribution of work amongst advocates? For instance, are there mechanisms in place to ensure that work is distributed evenly amongst female and male advocates?
Look, I mean, I know the Bar Council has this transformation project that they're doing where junior advocates can be brought into work and there's a skills transfer from more senior advocates. Excuse me, and I'm speaking purely here between in the perimeters of the Johannesburg Society of Advocates, because I don't belong to other bars. I don't know what they're doing. So I know there are several projects. I know the BLA has been trying to deal with these issues for years. I know Advocates for Transformation have been trying to deal with these issues for years. I know they've been trying to find and bring about change, even from a council level, from the members who we elect at the Bar Council, who really sit on these committees, who are the people who really can implement change from a policy level at the end of the day. So I know all those decisions exist, and I know there was a two advocates rule where there's this, well, it's not really a rule, where if you already have two white counsel on a brief, the third person, if there is to be a third advocate, that person has to be black. But you see, there had to be decisions like that. People's hand had to be forced in order for Black people to get work and get equal recognition at the bar. But like you said, it's an old profession, and it's going to take a long time to transform. It's unfortunate, but it's a real reality that it's taken this long to transform the bar. And some people are now at a stage where they don't want to be honest about how long that transformation is taking, and people to just, putting a band-aid on it, really. The same way people want to put a band-aid on race issues in this country generally, and gender issues in this country, or gender-based violence. So there's certain things that are really uncomfortable for people to talk about, especially when those things impact on their own privilege and their own comfort. So if we speak transparency about briefing patterns, I can tell you their efforts, and I think those efforts are ongoing, but
Yeah.
you can't make a 10 brief council. It's also coming from a place of trust, because at the end of the day, while we can speak transformation as much as we want, people brief who they want. I
Yeah.
can't make you brief me if you're an attorney. We can talk about transformation as all we want. I mean, you can even do it for purposes of BEE or meeting a certain quota or whatever the case is. But when people don't believe in certain groups of people, they will always try and find a way to get around it. When people don't trust women as professionals, and they don't trust the gender,